Welcome to The Rest is Tech.
So what are we talking about this week?
We're going to talk about the value of experience.
You know what you know and you've learned probably the hard way.
They don't know any better.
What does that actually mean?
I think that's a natural conclusion. Let's do that again. We're going to talk about the value of experience, the benefit of fractional employees as opposed to full-time or contract employees.
So what experience can bring to a business?
Indeed. What problems it addresses that other functions might not address.
So we've got a crib list to get us going?
We have got a crib list. So the value of experiences we're talking about, so we're talking about people might not appreciate how cheap they can get things or how cost effective rather than cheap they can buy things, how quickly they can implement new processes, functions, systems. People might not know about the pitfalls to avoid. People might not know what good looks like. They might not know what to put into a contract. SLAs, KPIs, that sort of thing. And if they're fully immersed in a business, they might not be able to look beyond the obvious. So experience brings solutions to all those problems.
So to me, that sounds like three sort of different categories of things. There's what I would call the hygiene stuff, getting your costs under control, understanding whether you're getting value out of existing suppliers or not, or new suppliers, whatever it might be. You mentioned SLAs, KPIs, they're very important, but they're quite hygiene-y in terms of the things you need to have. They're not particularly
sexy.
They're not going to set you apart from the competition necessarily. Well, they might be if you've got them wrong. Then to me, you mentioned cost. I see it more as value. Now, are we making good value-based decisions? That's something that experience brings a lot of insight into. And then it's back to what we discussed the other week, the art of the possible. Experience can bring you things you didn't even think you needed to know, and open your eyes to what the art of the possible is.
Indeed.
So should we take them one at a time? Hygiene stuff?
Hygiene. Yeah. Take the boring first.
Yeah, let's get it out of the way.
Yeah. Well, so contracts, people don't know necessarily what to put in a contract. One thing I often see missing is termination clause. All contracts come to an end at some point. All systems or suppliers have a natural end to their tenancy. So you need to have a termination clause in there to make sure that the supplier works well with you and helps you with the next system, supplier, whatever.
And as you say, that's not uncommon, because quite often people outgrow their existing suppliers, and that's a problem you might be dealing with when you come into a business, that you've actually outgrown, that the business has grown but the supplier base not necessarily grown with it or not able to keep up with it, and you need to have that change. Now is the time to have that change.
And certainly the businesses we get involved with often outgrow their systems because we help them grow quicker than they were thought was possible.
So contracts, and this is where SLAs are important as well.
Yeah, SLA is probably more important during the lifetime of the contract. Talk to many companies, they just don't know what good looks like. They don't see a month-by-month service report to tell them how things are behaving, what's been happening, so they don't know what they're really paying for.
And I think we were discussing this the other day, that quite often in these service reports, there's lots of measurements. But the measurements don't necessarily have any, some of them will, but don't necessarily have any value. It's just lots of measurements, and we have lots of nice green status on things. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean I'm getting good service? Does that mean I'm getting good value? Or is it just an easy thing to measure that I can report as green on a regular basis?
No, I agree. So value is making sure that those SLAs are business-related SLAs, not IT-related SLAs. So a typical IT SLA will say it has an uptime of 99%, but that doesn't mean anything to the business, and that's just very IT-centric, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure I had that once when if you look at 99% uptime or 99.9, whatever it is, it actually means you can have no service for 4 consecutive days. And still hit that target on an annual basis. But obviously, not having a service for 4 days could cripple your business.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it has to be business related. I like to talk about fingertip to eyeball as an SLA. So you press a button on a keyboard and the information comes up on a screen. That's what businesses are interested in, not how quick the link is or how fast the servers are or that they're available. They want the information when they press the button.
Yeah, and the information that's pertinent to the business, not, as you said, not the what the network's doing that week.
No. So they're the sort of SLAs and the sort of things you need to put into a service contract, part of the overall implementation. But like I said, the termination clause very rarely is implemented, often missed. So we want the supplier to be a good supplier. And with all contracts, the value of a good contract is it never comes out of the drawer, does it?
Yeah.
It gathers dust and is never seen the light of day. So you want the contract terms you want to have the negotiation of the contract terms and get them all settled when you're all in a good mood and you're all working together. Because if you ever have to take the contract out of the drawer, the chances are you're not on speaking terms or not on very good terms.
You need to plan for divorce at the outset. I know it sounds terrible, but yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
You mentioned, a lot of contracts don't have termination or don't consider, the end of the contract, the end of life of the contract. So what sort of things do you see that are often missing?
Well, it's just that the outgoing supplier needs to provide access to their systems, access to their data, be willing to export the data. Data is, as we've heard many times, the new oil. That's the lifeblood of companies. The information they have about the way they work and their customers, that's crucial. Doesn't matter what system they have, that's the most important thing. So being able to get that information out of the outgoing supplier into the new company in a frictionless environment, an easy way, where it's like, yes, we agree, this is how it's going to be done and how it's going to be exported, etc. Makes things easier, makes things easier for the incoming company. They know what they've got to connect to and how they've got to pull it in. So
I was really thinking through that, as you said at the outset, to make sure that it's contractually covered so that in the event you do go your separate ways, there's enough in there to make sure that it all runs smoothly.
Indeed, and it might not, the company might be bought out, the supplier might be bought out, it therefore gives small companies access to small companies because they maybe don't feel as financially stable, therefore they know that they can get their data at any time and therefore they can work with smaller companies with more ease. I'm working with a client at the moment that was very worried about the financial stability of any company, and they were looking at big companies, but big companies come with a big price. So, that's the main. I think for me, the SLAs, the ongoing management, what they're looking at, and that brings into the cyber bit, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of companies say, "Oh, we've outsourced our cyber." Someone else looks at that, and I always say, "Well, where's the cyber report? How many attacks have you defended this month?" I don't know. Well, you must have done. No company is immune to cyber attacks. You just haven't experienced it because they've been well defended. But you need to know that.
Or you don't know. That's yeah. And there's that thing as well, isn't it? You can outsource responsibility, but not accountability.
Indeed.
So someone can do it for you, but you still have to have the information and take an active interest in, because at the end of the day, you're the accountable party.
Indeed. So, I mean, that's the hygiene factor, I think. Yeah, value for money, value. Should we move on to that?
Well, that's what experience brings, isn't it? Is that understanding of what is good value and what is perhaps not so good value, and the ability to actually quickly benchmark where you are.
Yeah, I think I talk to clients and I always say, well, what I say is what I believe. Suppliers will always try and sell you their solution, their service, whatever it is, at the highest price they think you can afford. Whereas if you...
That's very cynical.
But it's true, isn't it?
Reasonably, yes.
But I'm a Yorkshireman, you see, I speak what I think. But if you, with the value of experience, you can go in and say, well, actually, yeah, okay, but I know that was implemented just down the road or the other month for this. So why are you now charging this value for this, what I think is more or less the same system?
So have you often seen, when you go into a new organisation and you're looking at these sort of value propositions, do you come across things where you're driven to change suppliers, or is it a renegotiation with the existing supplier? So, well, that might have been value 5 years ago when we started, but it's not delivering the value it should do now.
So when we talk to our clients, I always encourage them to include the current suppliers in any re-evaluation of systems, because I've seen that sometimes suppliers have been suggesting new systems, but our clients, not having a lot of tech knowledge, just are resistant to change, and therefore when we get involved and give them the confidence that we're actually on their side and helping them make decisions on their benefit, they feel more comfortable and they can listen to existing suppliers. So where a supplier might have been spending 5 years trying to persuade them to upgrade their systems, they're still on-premise servers rather than going to the cloud or whatever it happens to be. So we get them involved, all existing suppliers get involved, and as you just said 5 minutes ago, sometimes clients have outgrown them anyway, or I also think it's a case of they don't know what good looks like. So see many clients that are very happy with their current provider because they don't know any better, really.
Yeah, they don't know what questions to ask.
Or that they're getting a level of service that they're happy with, but actually they should be getting a far better service. It's just that they haven't experienced anything different.
So it can act as an impetus for change. I'd agree. I mean, I think I've seen it quite a few times, and we always, like you, have always included the existing providers when we're looking to advise, to reevaluate.
Yeah.
It's probably about 50-50. I'd say like half the time the incumbent steps up and actually wins that process, comes out the victor in that process, and then probably about half the time they don't. And it's normally because of a level of complacency, which can build up over time, which is obviously the reason why you do things like this, to try and get the value back out the...
Yeah, I mean, I've just been dealing with one client where one of the existing suppliers, they had a number of suppliers, one of the existing suppliers, when I sent them the requirements, said, oh, we haven't been advised that we can talk to you. And I said, well, that's fine, you don't have to talk to me. We're doing this exercise anyway. If you want to be involved, and the client was worried that they were going to start charging them for their involvement. So I just gave them some simple wording that they could send to them and say, well, it's up to you whether you get involved. This is outside our current contract. So it was very clear that they wouldn't be charged, the client wouldn't be charged for them essentially doing pre-sales work and submitting response to...
That's in that comfort zone, isn't it? People have sometimes got too comfortable, the relationship's too comfortable.
Well, also, I think that's a great benchmark to say, well, what sort of poor service is that supplier giving to the client if that's their attitude? They just charge for everything. There should be some give and take in a relationship.
Yeah, some value add, some investment in the relationship.
And if the client just automatically expects they're going to have to pay for everything, that's just not but they just don't know any better. It's going back to that, they don't know any better.
Yeah.
It's opening their eyes to, so experience, quicker to implement, so clients don't necessarily know how long it should take to implement something, or they have an impression, but with added complexity, because we're often never just replacing like for like. There's always an improvement in efficiency or process or all of the above. So they might not appreciate how quickly things can be done or how slowly.
Or even the order sometimes. Like quite often, you mentioned data earlier, how important data is, but quite often when you're doing a system re-implementation or changing systems, data becomes very important.
Yeah.
Things like data cleansing, tidying up your data, perhaps even reorganizing it.
No, absolutely. That's a good point. So data cleansing and data migration are two massively underestimated activities, aren't they? As you say, cleansing, just making sure that all your data is consistent and clean. What do we mean by that? So if a common one, an address field in one system might be subtly different from an address field in another, or even one system might have the same address 3 times because one of them has an extra space in it or has an extra full stop in it, and systems just take that as a different address. So cleansing all that so you have one version of the truth. And then migration, people often forget how long it takes to migrate data or how long it can take. And you can't just, if it's a big system that's been around for years, you can't just well, you can. Nothing's impossible, but it's advisable not to migrate it the night you go live. You want to migrate it a month or so before, test it, make sure it works, and then do a delta migration on the night, so you've got a very small amount of data.
Yeah, so quite often you migrate big chunks of data that are historic and aren't actually actively being used.
Yeah.
Either before or after. I've seen it done afterwards as well.
Yes.
But the actual live data, which is a subset, a smaller, that can make it. Yeah. So experience helps you understand ways in which that can be done more efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, I think the benefit of doing it, you're right, you can do it afterwards, but the benefit of doing it before, in my opinion, is you've tested it, so you know the migration works. Yes. You've got some real data in the new system, so it's there to test and play the new system. If you're just going live, you will have to put some data into the new system to test it in the first place. So, yeah, it can happen either way, but in my mind, the best thing is to do it in advance, so you've got real data in the new system and you can genuinely get a good feel for how well it works or doesn't work. And that, I suppose, follows on to pitfalls. Experience helps you identify pitfalls. You don't know what pitfalls there might be in implementing any system or that particular system. So experience comes with all the battle scars of having done it many times before. Yeah,
and I think that's it's important to say that experience, not necessarily the same industry or the same system. There's lots of similarities when data migration we just discussed as one of them, but lots of similarities when you're changing systems or upgrading systems or introducing new systems. It doesn't really matter what sector that experience comes from. It's the systems, the technology experience that will pay dividends for you.
Yeah, and I think, I'm following on from that. I don't think it's just experience of systems, it's experience of how suppliers work as well. That helps.
Oh, and how organisations react internally to the change as well.
Indeed. Yeah, so the experience of the whole process, the systems, the suppliers, internal customer or internal staff reaction to new systems. For me, I have a tried and tested process that I still hang my hat on, which is have advocates, get them involved from the very first. So before you want to do something, but get them involved in identifying the requirements, get them involved in system selection, get them involved in testing, so that when the system goes live, it's not an IT system, it's not a senior management system, it's their system. They've lived and breathed it, they've selected it, they defined what it should be, and therefore they're promoting it to their colleagues that aren't part of it. And the fact they're doing the training, the testing, you don't necessarily have to have dedicated training, because they sort of self-taught, understand it through the testing and training, which most people learn hands-on rather than looking at a screen and trying to figure out something and then going to implement it or put it into practice a month or 2 months later when they've forgotten it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're straying into the art of change management now, but it's very much, do it with people, don't do it to people.
Yeah, so maybe that's a topic for another a future conversation. So rather than straying, going tangential, what does experience bring? It knows what good looks like. So some clients might not know what, I've already talked about, they're very happy with what they've got, but they don't know what they could have. They don't know, say, the art of the possible or what good looks like. And that's what experience brings, is, well, you could have all this.
I think that's a really important one, and also experience helps you put that in the context of the organisation. So what good looks like for one business may be different from what good looks like in another business, even in the same sector, depending on their wants, needs, risk appetite, the amount of money they want to invest in, etc. So good is not a one size fits all.
Agreed.
It's applying it for that particular set of circumstances, that business, in that business's growth cycle, expansion cycle, whatever challenges it's facing at the moment.
Yeah, and like you say, growth cycle, so every business has maybe a slightly different strategic ambition. So yes, good looks different. One might just be focusing on the UK market, another one might be focusing on expansion in UK and internationally. So good looks different.
Good looks different in both situations, yes.
Yeah. And I think the final thing I have on my list is experience helps companies see beyond the obvious. So many companies, people might have worked for a company for years, decades even. They've only ever worked in that company, they're really happy, they've got a really loyal workforce, or they've only ever worked in that industry. And therefore, experience brings, well, this is, again, what could be possible. Seeing beyond the norms for that industry, stretching that company to achieve better or better quicker.
This is where I think sector expertise plays a role, because like you say, if you've worked in the same company or the same industry for a very long time, it's natural that you become an expert in that area, but you're also to some extent blinkered in that area because you know so much about it and you know what you know, and you've learned probably the hard way some of those lessons. And bringing in experience where people have worked in other sectors, in other industries, can quite often actually open your eyes to the art of the possible, and experience will lead you to ask the questions that may appear daft, but may actually underpin an assumption that's not particularly valid anymore.
Yeah, I think the biggest question experience brings is the confidence to ask the question, why? Why do you do that? Why?
So was it 3 whys or 7 whys? You just keep asking why.
Yes.
Until you get to the nitty gritty of the issue.
But yeah, I mean, asking why, there's stories or, clients you've asked the question, why do you use that process? Oh, because Dave introduced it. Okay, why did Dave introduce it? Well, I'm not sure. Okay, let's go and talk to Dave. Oh, we can't talk to Dave. He left 3 years ago. Okay, maybe we should look at that process because no one understands why we follow it or why it's the best thing. So we've always done it that way. Why have you always done it that way? You need to have...
That's a really important point, because quite often those processes were probably introduced for very valid reasons, but those reasons may not be valid any longer if it was brought in a long time ago, and the world moves on, and therefore the experience to ask something that just doesn't look logical and actually get to the bottom of not necessarily why it was introduced in the first place, but is it still relevant? Is there a better way of doing it today?
Yeah.
And get into the habit of challenging that, saying, well, can we do better? Can we improve it? Are there changes we can make? Experience plays a big part in that.
But that shouldn't just be the value of someone with experience like ourselves coming in and helping. That should be a continuous thought process within a business.
Yeah. And it needs to be baked into the business moving forward as well, if it's not already there, that challenge.
Yeah. But I suppose what we can bring is helping people get into that mindset of constantly asking why.